This is Lives of Adventure, and I'm your host, Jeff Gardner. I'm back after a few weeks hiatus to bring you the story of another adventurer. Today's guest is someone who's very well known in the worlds of adventure racing and ultra running, but who, I have to admit, I'd never actually heard of before one of my previous guests, Kevin Tobin, introduced me to him. Harald Zundel is an amazingly interesting guy. He was born and raised in Germany and came to the US for university. And actually, during university, ended up joining the US Navy. And actually, this is potentially maybe the most baffling part of Harald's entire story, to me at least, but early in his naval career, he somewhat accidentally decided to become a Navy SEAL, as if it's something that's just simple or easy, right? Years later, as Harald was finishing up with the Navy, he did his first adventure race on a team with several other SEALs. They won that race, and from that point on, Harald was hooked. Eventually, he would become a professional adventure racer, spending nearly 8 years traveling and competing full-time before quitting the pro life and actually endurance sports altogether for a few years. But more recently, Harald has gotten back into challenging himself by running extremely long-distance races like the Barkley Marathons, the Bigfoot 200, and the Ultra Trail du Mont Blanc. I had a really great time talking to Harald, and I was struck most by the understated and the humble way that he talks about his appetite for endurance and punishment, and how he talks about his achievements. He's spent his entire life testing his own boundaries, and apparently he hasn't yet found them. So before I pull a Hollywood movie trailer on you and totally spoil the show, let's get right into my conversation with Harald Zundel. So, Harald, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jeff.
So I'm going to start somewhere maybe potentially obvious. To a lot of people in the running and kind of adventure race circles, you're known just as the German. And so I'm going to make kind of a leap there and assume that you're originally from Germany. Where did you grow up, and kind of can you tell us a little bit about what that was like?
Yeah, you're right. I did grow up in Germany, in Frankfurt, about 30 miles north of Frankfurt, middle central Germany. Born and raised there, went to German school, German educated. My mom is American, so that's how I had to had to learn how to speak English, because she forced me to, like all good parents do.
Right.
Yeah, it was great growing up there. Definitely a little bit different lifestyle than here in the States, and so the transition when I came from Germany to America, the first couple of years was kind of hard, especially since I went to South Carolina. So that was a whole new society for me, so to speak.
Yeah, I'd say that was a pretty different place to be.
Yeah, it was.
Very cool. So Frankfurt, it's kind of flat country there, isn't it? So like, was the outdoors a big part of your childhood when you were growing up, or is it something you kind of found a little bit later in life?
Yeah, I always liked to be in the outdoors when I was younger. I don't know, back then, when I say this, I feel so old. It's like we didn't do much video games or being on a computer, and we spent a lot of time outdoors. So whether it was going to the swimming pool or going for a long hike to the lake and hang out at the lake, windsurfing or paddling, or even just going for a run, as kids, we did that a lot, just spending the time outdoors after school and not going home until it basically got dark and it was dinner time.
Yeah, I've got some friends here actually in Italy that have pretty much the exact same memories, and they're just like, yeah, we were thrown out the door just after breakfast and told to come back for dinner, and that was it. It was like there was no planned, organized, activities or anything like that. It was just like, get out of my hair, come back for dinner.
Yeah, exactly. And I kind of enjoyed it. That's what I knew. But, so every day you could do whatever you wanted and come up with new ideas and talk to your friends and just go on an adventure. So there was a lot of flexibility in my childhood. And I think that's where I got my adventurous spirits. I love to explore. I had the capability, and my parents allowed me to explore. And so that stuck with me until now.
That's a really interesting one, actually. I think, there's a lot of articles about helicopter parenting and all the rest these days. And I wonder what, And I don't know if you can properly answer this because you're kind of you'll be the kid in the story and kind of thinking back about how your parents were thinking at that time. But, have you noticed like a really big change in that, feeling, sentiment, that sort of thing? Like what was it about your parents that kind of allowed them to go, yeah, he'll be fine. We'll just let him go out for the whole day.
I think there are a couple things. One is that they both worked, they had full-time jobs, and financially they weren't that well off. So, they really couldn't afford a babysitter or anything. So it was their hands was kind of forced for me to be on my own without any like babysitting supervision. So in that sense, they did trust me. They started out with leaving me, at the house by myself when I was 7, 8 years old. Half an hour here, hour there, just giving me that feeling of wow, they're giving me responsibility and they're trusting me. So I think they instilled in me a trust that hey, they're leaving me alone, and I don't want to break that trust. And I kind of grew up really fast that way, but it really gave me a lot of independence. And my parents saw that I was able to handle myself on my own. I was able to make my own lunch, take care of myself when I came back from school, do my homework, be responsible, but then, do whatever I want to do in the afternoon. And I'm really grateful for them being that way.
That's amazing, actually. I don't know. I mean, I've got a 4-year-old, and I'm like trying to think of like what he'll be like in 3 years, and if I would be like happy leaving him at home to like make his own meals and things. I can't say that I maybe would be, but I suppose I've got a couple of years to wait and see.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy looking back that I was able to do that, and I think I was interested in kind of like the household stuff too. I watched my mom cook and she let me help her. So I learned a lot of things from her, and she realized early on, you know what, he can take care of himself. He won't starve if he's left alone. And
Yeah,
it worked out well.
that's great. That's cool. So what age were you when you moved to South Carolina?
I moved in 1989, so I was just 20 years old. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So you literally grew up all of your childhood, all the way through to kind of finishing secondary school. You did that all in Germany.
Yes, I did. I actually started like a university type schooling in Germany, engineering school for one semester. And back then, well, it's all subsidized by the government, so it was free, and which is good in one way, but in the other way, there were so many students, and if you weren't there 20 minutes before lecture time, you didn't have a seat in the class. So it was kind of stressful, and had to be really on time and diligent. And even when you were on time, sometimes you couldn't make it into the classroom. And my grandparents lived here in the States in South Carolina, and we were just talking to them, just said, hey, why don't you come over here and go to college here and then go from there, go do an adventure, and we'll support you as much as we can, and and see how it goes. And I took their advice and made a decision to go over here to South Carolina and go to college here.
Wow, that's super cool. Was it, I mean, you said already that it was a bit of a culture shock, was kind of getting into university and kind of getting, immersed in that kind of very different university culture, or I'm assuming it was very different. Was that really tough at the time, or was it, felt like university, maybe a little less busy, but it was more the outside of university kind of culture stuff that was very different?
Yeah, it was kind of both. And coming to the US, I didn't do any research. I didn't really know what I was getting into. I just kind of jumped in with both feet and said, okay, let's do it and see what happens. And I was fortunate enough that my grandparents lived just an hour away from a community, or actually a satellite college from University of South Carolina, and that was in Beaufort. So I started in a small campus setting, which really helped me to transition from my lifestyle in Germany to the lifestyle in the US. Being a foreigner and still having a really heavy accent at that time made actually all the students want to talk to me and take care of me and learn who I am, where I'm from, and help me out. And so I was fortunate enough that I had a lot of help from a lot of different students and even the teachers at that satellite campus. And it was pretty easy actually to get integrated into this kind of school system here in the U.S.
That's cool. And in moving, did you have, before you actually arrived, did you have a lot of fear about kind of what would happen when you got there? Or, was it more, you kind of just jumped in 2 feet forward and kind of went, well, my grandparents are there. Like, I'll be looked after enough. I'll sort of figure it out as I go.
Yeah. There wasn't that much fear. Honestly, when I sat on the airplane pulling out of the terminal, the biggest feeling I had was all of a sudden just sadness, because that was the point I realized, oh my God, I'm leaving everybody behind, all my friends, the life that I knew. And I was doubting myself, are you really doing the right thing? But luckily it happened on the plane, so there was no way back. So I just said, okay, you're here now. Let's deal with it, and give it 1 year try, see how it works. You can always go back. And well, 1 year turned into 30 years, I guess. I'm almost here. Yeah, so it's kind of crazy.
Mad. Late 80s, there was no internet, so there was not much you were going to do to like keep track of people other than, the random phone call every now and then or writing letters.
Yeah, exactly. Writing letters. A lot of people probably don't even know what that is anymore.
Yeah, exactly. I was saying to somebody on one of the podcasts, I remember calling my now wife from a phone booth in Yosemite, like when we first met. And I was like, wow, that's a sign of the times.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, so just jumped in and went for it.
That's amazing.
See where it leads me.
So Tobin gave me very little information about you other than to say he started the whole thing with former Navy SEAL. So where was the transition between, going to college in South Carolina and, ending up in the Navy?
Yeah, it's all pure accidental, really. I never thought I would join the military when I came to the States. So what happened is, one of the things I realized in Germany, education was basically free. Coming here to the States, oh my God.
Yeah.
Even back then, it seemed very expensive.
Yeah, not so free.
Not so free. I'm like, wow, I had no idea. So the first couple of years, I just basically worked every time I was off from college. Had a job at a grocery store or a warehouse, whatever I could find just to make some money to pay for the tuition, because I did not want to rely on my parents or my grandparents. I wanted to be independent. So doing that the first 2 years was fine, but I learned through college, through my counselor, that you can apply for grants and scholarships. So I started doing that and was able to get some grants and an engineering scholarship, which was amazing, and it covered half of the tuition. So there was still that other half that I had to worry about. Well, when I was in my junior year, I just saw a flyer in the dormitory that's the Navy ROTC is looking for engineer students to join their nuclear engineering program. I'm like, well, let me learn more about that. That could be the opportunity to get free money and even, after college have a job. So I went there and applied and I got it. So I joined Navy ROTC on the basis of becoming a nuclear engineer. But that kind of changed about a year later when I realized as a nuclear engineer, you're going to be there either on a ship for 6 to 9 months or on a submarine for 6 to 9 months. And being the adventurous type, that just didn't seem so enticing for me.
Right.
So, but I already accepted a scholarship. I was already getting the money and I was already ROTC. I'm like, well, what else can I do? And as it happens, there was a small group of ROTC students at my college that had this club called Navy SEAL Preparatory Training Team. I'm like, whoa, what is that all about? And so I talked to them and said, yeah, well, we work out every day in the morning before class and we're gearing up to be physically strong and we want to go to SEAL school and become Navy SEALs. And I didn't know what a Navy SEAL was at that point. So I read up about it, and it seemed very challenging and very adventurous and kind of fit who I am. So I basically told my ROTC counselor, once I realized what the Navy SEAL is and what they do and what kind of lifestyle it would be, that I'm interested in. I want to switch from becoming a nuclear engineer and put my application to go to SEAL training. So that's kind of how it all happened. And I got accepted before I graduated and went straight to BUDS, to basic underwater demolition SEAL training in Coronado after college.
Man, I'm starting to see a pattern here, Harold. Like you seem to just kind of go, "Oh, that looks cool. I'll do that." And you just go.
Yeah, that's true. There's no plan, that's for sure.
That's mad. Because I mean, I guess, and maybe actually in that sense, certainly with the SEALs, maybe not having sort of a mythology built up in your head around it made it easier to kind of just go, oh, that looks really interesting. I am interested in that, and not to have kind of a fear built up around it. Would you say that might be true?
Yeah, I think that's very true. I mean, I read some books about it, but it was all stuff that kind of made the SEALs look, I don't know, grandiose, that they can do anything they want. They're really fit, mentally strong. So all positive things. And I did not see the aspect of, well, how do you become a SEAL? What do you have to go through and what do you have to endure to actually get to that stage? That wasn't my concern. I just wanted to see the end result. So yes, I did not have any fear because I didn't look into what it takes to become a SEAL.
And so what does it take?
What does it take? Mental stamina. At first, I thought physical fitness going into training, but what they really do is they tear you down physically anyway, and then they build you back up. So it doesn't matter how strong or how weak you are, they're going to get you to where they need you physically. So the toughest part was really the mental aspect. Everything they throw at you and you have to deal with, and also the always being in a cold, wet environment. You think the training is in San Diego, so it's going to be warm and it won't be cold, but that Pacific Ocean, man, it's so cold, and we spend a lot of hours there. And it really, you have to be just mentally tough, focused, and really want to be there. And they give you plenty of opportunities to say, you know what, you shouldn't be here. Why don't you come and have a cup of coffee and a donut and quit? They try to entice you at any moment where they see a weakness for you to quit. So you just got to be really strong and know that, hey, this is really what you want to do.
And I mean, was that like my next question was going to be kind of what's the self-talk in those situations? Like, how did you convince yourself to stay? Was it just as simple as, no, you said you really wanted to do this. Now, now you're getting it. Now you have to be here. Or, was there something else kind of behind that was driving you to really want to stay in it?
I think there were two things. So, as an officer, if you go through BUDS SEAL training and you don't make it, you get rolled into the regular fleet, into the Navy. So basically, you're going to be on a ship. That's your job. So one of them I already knew. That's why I switched in the first place instead of being a nuclear engineer. Being a SEAL, because I didn't want to be on a ship for months on end. So that was a good motivation. And the other way I motivated myself is anytime somebody quit along the lines, I said, good for you. You don't belong here. You go. I'm staying. Thank you for, giving up, because I'm not going to give up. So I kind of got strength from other people quitting.
Interesting. And I mean, I suppose like you did say, lots of people are leaving. They give you ample opportunities. Was there a point at which you were kind of, like what was the lowest point? Was there a point at which you were really tempted to take that offer?
There was once on a long swim. We did like a 7-mile swim, and when you swim with a swim buddy, so you're always with a buddy, whatever you do. Mm-hmm. And that day, I just felt physically and mentally drained, and the swim seemed so much harder than I envisioned. And we've done longer swims before that swim, and I had no problems. But for some reason, I was struggling really hard, and my mind was just starting to turn and spin, and thinking, hey, maybe you're not made for this, and maybe you should quit, So I had those thoughts for a few moments, and then I don't know, something else took over and said, you know what? Yeah, you will have some weak moments, and you just got to get through it. That's one of the things they want to see, that even if you have a weak moment, that you can still perform and still survive, basically. And so I kind of talked myself out of quitting and kept on swimming. And then after that, that was really the only low point or the time where I thought about, quitting the SEAL training.
Very cool. So I guess, you finish with BUD/S, you finish with SEAL training. What happens next? Because I think, there's documentaries out there on Netflix and things that kind of show you what some of BUD/S looks like, but they never really talk about necessarily what happens right after that. Are you immediately deployed? Do you just join a group and you're kind of waiting around to be deployed? How does it work?
Yeah, so before you finish BUD/S, they ask you the three preference where you want to go, whether you want to be on the East Coast or West Coast, what team you want to go to. Back when I went through BUD/S, the teams were based on geographical location. So actually, my first choice was to go to SEAL Team 2, because back then they were stationed out of the East Coast, but then forward deployed in Germany. I'm like, wow, what a great fit. I grew up in Germany. I speak German, so that's what I want to do. But I guess what it comes down to ultimately is manpower and where they need to fill spots. So when I graduated, Germany or SEAL Team 2 had already the quotas for the officers. So I was put into SEAL Team 3, which is on the West Coast. So once they designate where you're going to go, then you go to that team, and then you have more advanced training, can be up to 4 to 6 months of advanced training. And then after that training, you have to go in front of the board, and they ask you tons of questions about SEAL tactics, different scenarios. What would you do? And then based on how you answer those, how you respond, they will either say, okay, you're qualified to be a SEAL now, and we'll give you the Trident, or they say, you know what, you're just not ready yet. You need more training, and then go from there.
Very interesting. And I guess, how long were you a SEAL after that point, I guess, is the best question next.
Yeah, so I was, by the time I went to BUD/S and by the time I got out, I was in for 4.5 years.
Okay. And so did you, finish after your 4.5 years? Was it like a situation where you, to kind of earn back your scholarship and things, you gave them 4.5 years and then that was the end of it?
Yeah, exactly. So you have to serve for a certain amount of time. For me, it was 4 years. So I stayed in 4.5 years. And then I just kind of knew I didn't want to have a military career. It was something that I was intrigued and by to become a SEAL and see how it goes. But I don't think I was really ever going to be a career military officer. So after I put in my time, I was kind of ready to see what my next challenge would be.
And what was that next challenge?
Yeah, so the next challenge was actually it's kind of coincidental. Right before I got out, I did my first adventure race in the Middle East. I did it with a Navy team, and we went to United Arab Emirates for a 5-day staged adventure race in the desert. Didn't know anything about adventure racing. My background then was triathlons, but they invited me to go, and I went, and man, that sport just intrigued me so much. And after that race, we actually won the race. And after that race, I'm like, you know what? I'm getting out soon of the Navy, and I could see myself doing more of these races and see where it goes, see if I can actually become a quote unquote professional, which weren't that many back in the days. But I said, you know what? I'm going to give it a try and see where I end up.
Very interesting. So you went from like cold and wet to hot and dry in the middle of the desert in an adventure race.
Yeah, that was pretty crazy, but it was fun.
So staged adventure races, I kind of, on an earlier episode with Tobin, we talked about like just generally what an adventure race is, but like a staged adventure race, what maybe is the difference between, some of the shorter races and what a staged race looks like?
Yeah, so a stage race, so the first race that I did, for example, there were 5 days, and each day had a start and finish. And depending on the day, it could have been mountain biking, running, paddling, maybe some orienteering. So each day is structured a little bit different, but you will have a start and a finish on that same day. And then you take a rest at night, and then you start over the next day. Whereas like an expedition type race or a continuous race is you have a start, And let's say you have to cover a distance of 150 miles and you'll finish however long it takes without any breaks. So it's up to you when you choose to sleep, when you choose to eat. Whereas stage racing, you'll eat during the day while you're racing, but then at night, you're going to rest. You put your feet up, you can have a great meal, a big meal, and get some rest. So
And
it's really a different approach.
yeah, very different. Like, do you have a preference on one or the other? Like, do you enjoy one more than the other? Or are you better, do you feel like you're better suited to one or the other?
I I actually enjoyed both of them because they both had their unique challenges. For the stage races, you had to be fast. Every day was basically you're competing in an Ironman. You're trying to do the best you can and as fast as you can. And then you get a great rest and do it over the next day. Then when you go to expedition races, it's a totally different strategy. You're going to go slower because you're not going to get as much rest, and you want to be as strong and as strong as possible for duration. So for those type of races, you really have to plan more. You have to see what kind of nutrition you bring with you out there. You got to cater to your team, see how the weakest link is doing at any time, if we need to take a rest or not. You got to be more strategic and tactical in those expedition races. And whereas in the stage races, it's like, okay, we know we got to go as fast as we can, and if we bonk at the end of the day, that's fine because we can get rest at night. But if you bonk during an expedition race, then the race is pretty much over for you.
Yeah. It sounds mental. I've never done any
Yeah.
adventure racing, and it just sounds totally insane to me.
It is insane. And what I enjoyed a lot was the team aspect of it. So you're not an individual, you have three other people with you. And so, you're catering to other people too. And in any moment in time when you're out there racing, you got to see, okay, what's the best way to handle the situation for the team, not for me, but for the team. And sometimes you have to give up your ego, and just be a team player and do what's best for the team, not what's best for you.
Cool. So you spent, how long were you? Because you did eventually arrive at the place where you were a professional adventure racer. Is that right?
Yes, I did. Like 3 years after I did my first race, I was a sponsored athlete, with a team, and we raced professionally all over the world. And I competed from 98 to 2005, so 7, 8 years.
Wow. And that entire time you were like basically on the road most of the time, kind of going race to race.
Yeah, pretty much. If I wasn't on the road, I was just training with my teammates out here.
I'd love to hear a little bit more about that lifestyle, because I've had various friends who were kind of at different points, either professionally sponsored kayakers or climbers, and I think those stories are always really interesting because from the outside looking in, it's sort of like the best possible world for somebody that's really into any sport to be into is like that professional lifestyle. Is it all it's cracked up to be? Like, is it as fun and kind of carefree as it sounds, or is it actually, are there a lot of different aspects of it that a lot of people don't really take into account?
Yeah, there's different aspects of it. I chose this route because I loved the adventure of adventure racing, just being out there. There were some sacrifices, financially, even though you're a sponsored athlete, it doesn't pay that well. It all depends on your performance or your team's performance. So the payout depended on that. So it wasn't that much money to be made, even with the prize money that was out there at that time. So my sacrifice was really my living situation. I always had a roommate or two roommates to afford where I was living. So because I didn't have any other income, there was no time to go to work somewhere else because either I trained or I was on the road racing. So you had to look at, okay, how can I make this work with the money that's coming in from racing and still live and not go into debt. So one of the sacrifices is you won't be able to live by yourself. You have to have roommates. You're going to minimize going out to bars or to restaurants. You're going to cook a lot at home, so you're going to cut wherever you can to save money. And so you can enjoy the travels and the racing.
And I mean, I'm guessing you were in it for 7 years. I'm guessing that those trade-offs were worth it for that, for at least the majority of that time period.
Yeah, I mean, there were so many magical moments racing. What's so cool about adventure racing is it takes you to spots all over the world that, as a normal tourist, you wouldn't see. It's the hinterland, it's the backcountry where you're going to go, not the touristy spots. And it was just amazing, whether it was the landscape, the scenery, or just the exchange of the people that lived here. Like, we raced in Brazil one year, and in the northeast of Brazil, and we got in touch with villagers. The village was like 5 huts. We had to spend a few hours there to sleep, and they were poor, they had nothing, but man, they enjoyed being hospital. They gave us anything they could give us to support us. They let us sleep on their beds. It's just amazing to see, the kindness that people have out there in the middle of nowhere. So there are definitely some great experiences.
So, it's amazing that, you get to go and see all these different places. Are there mental aspects of adventure racing that you kind of found yourself hooked on after a certain period of time? Or, did it start to kind of wear down over time and you just kind of sort of became immune to it over time?
I don't know if there were mental challenges. I just think each race was different and it had their own challenges. And that's, I think, what really intrigued me about racing adventure races is that there was not one race that was the same. I came from a triathlon background, like I said, and it's always the same race, the same distance, and not really new challenges except you and the time. But in adventure racing, anything can happen. You could be on a bike ride, something can break down on your bike. You don't have the parts to fix it, but you got to figure out how to MacGyver it and fix it so the whole team can move on, or somebody gets injured, you got to make the decision. Well, is the injury grave enough to quit, or can we fix it somehow and keep moving on? So
Right.
there's consistently and constantly, there's just challenges that you just have to deal with. And I think that's what really drew me to adventure racing. Just overcome, always figure out what's the best thing to move on. What's the best thing to do to move on? And I think I still, throughout life, kind of have the same mentality. Whatever obstacles are thrown at me, I'm like, okay, this is what I'm dealing with. What can I do to circumvent that obstacle to move on?
That's a really interesting point. And I think that's one that, I've already noticed quite a lot of similarities in several of the guests. And, one of my good friends, Joan, who was our second guest on the podcast, was talking about, sailing boats on her own and, having rudders break off. Yeah, having rudders break off the boat and like just being there on her, by herself on a boat in the middle of the ocean and just going, well, got to fix this, got to figure out how to make this work so I can continue.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think that
especially being,
yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, especially being by herself, in my case, at least I had teammates to depend on, and they might have an idea that I didn't think of. But in her situation, it's just all her, and it's a lot of pressure, but I'm sure also a challenge that she looked forward to. Otherwise, she wouldn't have done it. And it's amazing that she does stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's in general one of those, it is one of those qualities of people that enjoy kind of putting themselves out there, have to have, in a sense, is that sort of both resiliency, but also kind of, that ability to kind of figure out stuff on the fly or enjoy having to figure out stuff on the fly.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So you adventure raced up until about 2005. What precipitated you wanting to get out of adventure racing?
A couple of things. One, I have to be honest, I got really burned out racing for 7-8 years, doing, I don't know, 10 to 15 major races a year. I just got burned out. And then towards the mid 2000s, adventure racing in the US kind of dropped off. Sponsors pulled out. It wasn't that big of a thing anymore. And once sponsors drop out and TV drops out, there wasn't that much money in there. So I couldn't earn as much as I had in the past. So I had to make a decision. I'm burned out. There's not that much money in it anymore. So should I keep going on or stop? And so I decided to stop. I just needed a break. And actually for 3 years after that, I didn't do much of sports except for yoga. I'm like, you know what? This body needs to heal. I need to refocus and get stronger inwardly. And so I just totally took 3 years off, not doing any kind of sports and regrouped.
Interesting. That's another kind of theme that I've already come across from several people is that a lot of these, when you start to look at things over a longer time scale, you can be hyper focused on something for a certain period of time, but very few people can keep up a sustained effort over an entire lifetime in a single sport.
Yeah.
Did you feel like that kind of break from adventure racing and kind of, period in yoga helped you kind of move into the next phase? Or was it just you really needed to rest more than anything?
Yeah, no, it definitely both aspects. I mean, I definitely needed a rest, but it also helped me that break to moving in a different phase. I wasn't sure what I would do next as far as my athletics was concerned. So I kind of just went with how my body felt and what's the next interest would be. And after the 3 years, I'm like, you know what? I'm done doing yoga. Let's run again. So I started running, and then I just started signing up for smaller races, half marathons, then marathons, but all on trail, not on road. And I started to enjoy doing that physical activity again. And then I knew, you know what? I'm just going to pursue running now, and that's my new thing.
And you did not stick with the half marathons and marathons. You quickly went up to some much longer distances. I guess tell me a little bit about the progression, kind of going from, okay, I've run a couple of, half trail marathons, and then deciding, okay, I want to go longer.
Yeah, it was a kind of natural progression. And as you already can see a theme, I like to challenge myself. So once I knew I can do a marathon on the trail, I'm like, what's the next distance? And then I heard about 50Ks. I'm like, well, that's only what 6-7 miles longer than a marathon. I can do that. So I jumped into the 50K, and then I heard about 100Ks, and then the next one was a 100 miler. I'm like, well, I can do a 100 miler too. And then, it was an easy progression for me, but honestly, it was because of my background. I've done 600-mile races and adventure racing. During SEAL training, we had to do a lot of stuff with weight and long distance and endurance. So mentally, I was set to go and push myself and do longer distances and running too. And I had the experience, not for running per se, but for different disciplines. And so I knew I was capable of doing it. And I had the discipline also to train for those kind of distances.
And how do you train for those type of distances? I mean, is it just incredibly high volume of running all the time? Or is it, are there specific things that kind of outweigh other bits of the training that make 100 miles possible and potentially even enjoyable?
Yeah, at first I thought it was all high miles. You got to run a lot to do a 100 miler. But then I realized pretty quick it's just going to burn you out if you just do a lot of miles and you're not focused on what type of training to do. So I realized early on, I got to have a program, or just like with any other sport, it has to be some kind of an approach to maximize your efforts at race day. So I learned that, to build up, once you start, let's say you're looking for a 100 miler 2.5 months down the road. So you start training 2.5 months out. Go, let's say the first week you do 30 miles. The second week you do 40 miles. So you kind of build up. And then 4 weeks before your big race, you might have a 100-mile week, and then you start tapering off. So there's a science to it. And then also, depending on, is the 100-miler a flat 100-miler, or is it in the mountains? Is there a lot of elevation? So if there's a lot of elevation, then you got to focus on a lot of hiking, a lot of hills, and get your legs stronger for that too.
So I'm going to name a couple of races, and I'm probably going to get these completely out of chronological order here, but for people that know a little bit about ultras, I think all of these are pretty world class, pretty recognizable. The Barkley Marathons. That one just
Hmm.
seems like totally mental. I remember seeing a video on YouTube about Barkley, and I was just like, "This is insane." Um,
Yeah.
and then there's the Bigfoot 200 miler, which obviously, you think about 200 miles, it's a very, very long way. And so we'll come
Yes.
back to that one. And then there's the Ultra Trail de Mont Blanc, which is potentially maybe one of the, it is one of the most famous ultra races in the world.
Yeah, I
That
believe so too.
Yeah, that basically rings Mont Blanc, goes all the way around it, which is pretty incredible. Um, I suppose once you start to get into that kind of elite level of these races, like Barkley is very difficult to get into just because they're very closed about, you can't just like sign up and pay your entry fee. You've kind of got to be selected through the lottery and that sort of thing. Um, you know, what is it about these races that's such a draw for you? 200 miles, the Ultra Trail, Barkley Marathons. Is it just finding that, looking for that thing that challenges you more than what you've had before? Or is there something about, being part of this maybe mythology of ultra running?
Yeah, I think primarily it's really challenging myself. Once let's say complete a 100 miler, then I look for what's next. What's the next best challenge, and you hear about these races out there once you become involved in the sport of ultra running. You hear about these races like Barkley Marathon, Ultra Trail de Mont Blanc, and you're like, wow, that sounds interesting. Let's look it up and see if I can apply for it and go for it. So the Barclays, that was a tough one. Like you said, there's not a lot of information out there. There's a lot of misinformation about the race out there, and you got to figure out an approach to first of all see, well, how do I apply in the first place? Who do I need to talk to? How can I find out all that information? So it's a challenge in itself just to get your name onto that list, and I kind of like that. But then the race itself, it intrigued me because it's not only ultra running, it puts a lot of different elements into that race. With my background of adventure racing, I thought I was a good candidate to go out there and try it because it's orienteering. You have a map and compass, and you're on foot on this insane terrain where you have a lot of elevation gain and loss. So there's so many different aspects that you're going to get challenged at, and I really was intrigued by that race, and I was able to get in there 3 years ago and try my best to go out there, and it was very challenging, and it's both physically and mentally challenging, not only physically.
Yeah, it's an impressive one. I would like encourage anybody listening that hasn't seen. There's like a YouTube documentary, kind of a short one that I think covers Jared Campbell, one of his years where he first finished the race, and then I
Yeah.
think now I just saw on Netflix the other night. There's a whole documentary about it as well. I don't know if it's the same one or not, but
Yeah, it's a different one. The Netflix one is really, really good to watch.
cool. Yeah, it's on my list for sure. But it's a very impressive race for sure. And so the first time you got into that race, you kind of completed the fun run, which is what they call, I guess, the shorter version, just out of kind of the prescribed time limit. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So the fun run to consider it finishing a fun run, you have to do it in 40 hours, and I finished in little under 30 minutes after that. Um, you know, it's I'm happy with the result. Bottom line, it's you against the course, and the course, as you can tell, as history can tell, usually wins. Since the start of the Barclays, there's only been 15 finishers. So, and Barclay's been around since the 90s, I believe, or late 80s.
It's probably the
So
lowest
it's,
finisher ratio of any race in the world.
I believe so, for sure. Um,
Incredible.
it is incredible, and it's always fun, even when you don't make it into the race, to be on the sideline and to just follow the Twitter feed on race week and see what's going on. And it's an amazing event, and yes, there's still a lot of mystery around it, and I like that about it. It's something that intrigues people, and it's not easy to get in.
Yeah, that's fun. I mean, like there's that fun aspect as well, like just the fact that it is a bit secret. It is a bit hard to get into. It's not, it's definitely not a given. So that's great. So the Bigfoot 200 miler, you finished third in that race. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yep.
And I was sort of astounded by the statistics, so I'm going to have to read it out here. You finished in 70 hours and 32 minutes, and you slept, I think, 2 hours. Is that right?
Yeah, I slept 2 hours. Correct.
In 70 hours. What does that What does that do to you? I mean, I can't even imagine. I'm like, oh wow, I've been awake. Like the longest I've ever was awake for 40 hours or something. But like 2 hours and 70 is a long time. Did you feel okay? What happens physiologically at that level?
So I kind of broke down the race before I went there and see what should my strategy be. They had 4 or 5 different sleep stations where you can take a nap before you go back out. And I said, well, I've done a 100-miler before, so I know I can do 100 miles without sleep. So I was looking into the sleep stations after 100-mile, and there was one around, I believe, 120 miles. I'm like, that's where I want to sleep. I want to sleep there for 3 hours. That's my plan. And so, sure enough, by the time an hour before I got to that aid station, I was actually getting tired. And so I knew that was the right strategy. And I got to the aid station and told my crew, I'm ready to sleep 3 hours and wake me up when that time is up. But I ended up sleeping only 2 hours because I woke up after 2 hours and was wide awake. I'm like, you know what? No sense in staying here. If you're wide awake, let's keep on going. So my crew was a little bit surprised. I kind of woke them up. I said, let's go. But it worked out. 2 hours was enough for me to continue on the rest of the course without any more sleep. I do have to say, about 20 miles before the finish, I got really tired. It was a night section, and I could feel the sleep deprivation in my system. Luckily, I had pacers at that time, and also another thing that happened at that time, I was in 5th place, and there were a couple people in front of me. So even though I was sleepy, I said, you know what, I got to push on. Maybe I can catch some of these people before I finish. And so I had my pacer just run in front of me and just yell out every obstacle. I just followed blindly, like in half sleep. And eventually I woke up again and I was able to finish the race strong. But you do have those low moments, and it's your call. It depends on what's going on at that time, whether you should take a nap and sleep or you should push on and try to get over that sleepiness.
I mean, is that like part of the strategy really for you? You just know your body so well at this stage that you're kind of like, I know what I need at this stage, or, you just have learned to kind of tune into, whether you need sleep or food or, just a rest or whatever it is.
Yes, it's definitely a lot of experience. I mean, I've been racing like endurance events for over 20 years. So you learn a lot about your body. When I first got into endurance events, I trained with heart rate monitor and was really scientific about it. But now it's like all by feel and how my body's doing at the time, and also a good planning, knowing that I need a certain amount of calories per hour, knowing that I need electrolytes per hour, having a good plan and sticking with it. And then, if something happens that's out of the ordinary, you just have to deal with it.
Very interesting. So the Ultra Trail du Mont Blanc, which I guess there's like several different races, and maybe you can just give like a quick, 1 minute overview of kind of what the Ultra Trail du Mont Blanc is for those people that don't have any idea about what it is.
Yeah, so the UTMB, the biggest event is really the 100-miler. It circumvents Mont Blanc. It starts in Chamonix and ends in Chamonix. And that's really the big one that everybody wants to apply for. Usually you got 2,500 slots. We're talking 2,500 starters for a trail run, which is insane. Don't see that anywhere else in the world. And you probably have 10 to 15,000 people that apply for one of those spots. So it's a very well-known event. But part of the UTMB, they also have other distances. So if you don't want to do a 100-miler, they have like 119K, which is called a TDS, or they have a 100K, which is the CCC. And they also have a team event. 2 or 3 people can do the PTL, which is over days. I think it's like 4 or 5 days, depending on how fast you are, where you have to navigate and get to the finish. So they offer different distances, which is cool because not everybody wants to do a 100 miler. But like you said, it's world renowned. Everybody wants to go to Chamonix and do one of those races, and it's just an incredible atmosphere. They really have the organization nailed down. You have 2,500 people at the start running down the streets of Chamonix, and then you're hitting the trails, and you look in front of you, behind you, and you just see it's like a line of ants just going up the mountain. That's pretty amazing.
That's so cool. I mean, like Chamonix, I've done a lot of climbing and stuff, and Chamonix is Mecca for, alpinism. And so there's a lot of history and myth and, lore about the place. And so it's, I'm sure for ultra running as well, it's just an incredible place to be.
Oh, it's incredible. The trails are amazing. And well, the one thing about Chamonix, you're always going to go up first because Chamonix is in this big valley, and to get to the trails, you got to go up. It's a lot of climbing, but once you're on top on one of those ridges, it's just amazing views, spectacular views. And I love that place. And like you said, it's a mecca not only for climbing, for paragliding, for runners, for anybody. And the food is so good too.
Yeah, also very good. Very cool. So I guess, if someone was wanting to get into adventure racing or ultras or even just like half trail marathons and, didn't really have a background in doing a lot of endurance sports, how would you suggest someone even get started there? Is there, would you say just like start with a, simple half marathon, start with a road marathon, start with, something really, really small? Or would you say just, train and then dive into like a bigger race because you can do it?
Yeah, for most people, I would say just start small, especially trail running is so different than road running. Road running is kind of monotonous. I mean, it's always the same stepping pattern. It's flat as far as there's no rocks or branches or anything to try to avoid. There's not a lot of mental thinking, whereas trail running, it's exhausting, especially when you're not used to it, because not only are you dealing with the trail and the terrain, you're dealing with obstacles, and you got to mentally look forward. Okay, where can I place my foot for the next step? So there's constant thinking going on in trail running, whereas just on the road, it's kind of monotonous as far as the mental aspect is concerned. So if anybody wants to get into trail running, I would advise to start training on trail, see if you like it, doing runs on trail, mix it up, and then just pick a local race. It could be whatever they're comfortable with. It could be usually half marathon. It's probably one of the shorter races. So start in with a half marathon trail race and see if you like it, and then challenge yourself to at some point go to the next level, do like a full marathon or a 50K.
And if anybody needs any suggested races, they can come and visit me. There's several trail marathons here during the year that are fantastic.
Yeah, you're right. There's so many trail races out there all over the US. So, I mean, whether you live in California or in Tennessee or North Carolina, you will be able to find a trail race that suits your needs.
Yeah. Cool. So I want to be kind of respectful of your time. I know we've gone for a good while here now. I guess I've got a few questions that I like to ask pretty much everybody, and you are no different. So I will ask you these questions, and I'd love to hear your answers.
Sure.
So what does adventure mean to you?
In one sentence, living out of the box, to simplify it. But adventure is just anything that's not the norm, that maybe not many people have done, and you're out there, you're exploring that possibility, but also exploring what your body and your mind is capable of doing. You're stepping outside of your perceived boundaries, stepping outside of the cultural or societal boundaries, and you're doing something that's kind of scary, exciting at the same point too, but it's something new, and you're just jumping into it and see where it leads you. And that's kind of an adventure. there's somewhat of a plan, but once you're in it, not really. You're just following what's going to be placed in front of you and go with it.
Sort of like you said before, just kind of taking each challenge as it comes and working your way through it.
Exactly.
And so if that's how you define adventure, why do you think adventure is important in your life, or, in general, why should more people try and kind of put themselves outside of that box?
I think it just spices up life a little bit. It seems a lot of people kind of get into this work and life rut where it's always the same pattern. But just go out and try an adventure. Get out of the same lifestyle. Do something new and see if you like it. And with that, it can open so many other doors to what you may be interested in that you haven't even thought about. It's like when I started, let's say with adventure racing, I really didn't know what mountain biking was. I just kind of jumped into it. I didn't know what orienteering was. I jumped into it. But jumping into it and kind of taking control, you learn not only the discipline, but you learn about yourself and your capabilities and what you can actually do. A lot of people nowadays, I don't know, kind of sell themselves short because they just don't realize their potential. And adventure will show you what potentials you may have. And I think that's pretty exciting for anybody who wants to go out there and do an adventure.
And I just heard you mention discipline, and it's something that's kind of, I've heard the word a few times now through our conversation. Is there, do you feel like you have to, be very disciplined in order to kind of put yourself in adventurous situations? Or is it just one of those things that once you start to get into this kind of life of adventure, being more disciplined allows you to kind of get better at what you're doing?
That's kind of a tough question, but the discipline comes into, yes, I encourage anybody to go into an adventure, but I also encourage to be disciplined about it, meaning, kind of plan ahead, see what you're getting into, see what you have to prepare for to get into that adventure. And then once you're in it, making sure you have somewhat of a plan and follow that plan as much as you can, because it helps you to enjoy your adventure more because you're kind of more prepared. If that makes sense.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. In other words, don't throw yourself in the deep end without actually looking first.
Exactly.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Harald. I guess I will let you go at that. Is there anywhere where my listeners can look you up online, see you on social, give you a shout on, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, any of those things?
Yeah, Facebook is fine. Just look up my name, Harald Zundel, and I'm happy to, answer any questions or any advice people might want to have. No
Excellent.
Problems.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you again so much for your time. It's been great talking, and I'll probably be hitting you up for all sorts of advice from my end. I've just kind of gotten back into running there recently, and I've been running a couple of trail marathons recently. So I'll probably be pinging you about discipline and nutrition and all sorts of those things.
There you go. That's awesome. I mean, especially where you live right now, there's some good trails out there.
Yeah, it's steep. It's real steep. It's terrifyingly steep, but it's good. It's fun.
Awesome.
Cool. Listen, thank you so much, Harald.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. I really appreciate it.
Hey, everybody. Jeff here again. I just wanted to let you all know that we have finally officially launched on iTunes. So please go and check us out, subscribe to the show, and if you love it, do not hesitate to leave us a review. Even if you don't love it, actually, just leave a review. I'd love to see your feedback and hear what you have to say. And as always, you can always check us out online at livesofadventure.com, where we've got the podcast episodes, but I also every now and then write a blog post that you might or might not want to read. So do give us a shout. Let me know what you think. And in the meantime, have a great one, and we will see you again soon.